Hi, and welcome back to Unleash Your Inner Author. I'm Amy Collette, and I wonder as a reader if you've ever thought about what's important about starting and ending a book. Is there a method? Is there some standard way to do it? Some best practices? Well, of course, I have some ideas as a book coach, but you as the author always get to decide that. So today I'm talking with Megan, who's working through writing her book, and we're going to go through her actual intro and exit from the book, her wrap-up chapter. And there's a lot to talk about. There's some interesting aspects to learn about what the purpose of an intro is and why you want to do it a certain way. What is the purpose? It's to invite your reader into your world, into your book, and make it interesting enough for them to connect with and say, wow, I made the right decision. This is the book for me. I can't wait to dig in. So I invite you to do that in this podcast too, to dig into your own ideas about how you would start and end your book. What would that look like? So think about that as you're listening to our conversation about starting and ending Megan's book. And then at the end, there's a little juicy question that I asked Megan to consider about switching things around in her book at the end. And you'll have to listen in to see what Megan says about that. So I'll see you on the inside.
So, Amy, how do you start a book and how do you end a book?
Wow, that's a nice small question, Megan.
I'm at that point. It's got to be done. I've got
Okay.
drafts, but as you know, I've got drafts. You've seen them. But
Yes.
the beginning feels super, super high stakes to me in terms of getting people's attention right away, not immediately turning them off after they've purchased the book, and kind of setting the tone. So I want to get that right. And then the ending for the opposite reason is now they've finished the book. I need them to like me and want to maybe work together or tell their friends how great this book is. So
Right.
help me, please.
Right. So are there any other reasons that it feels particularly high stakes, these two bits for you?
I mean, probably that I've left them to the very end.
Uh,
So I've done all of everything else basically is done. It's just kind of the very, very beginning, except for the forward that someone is kindly writing for me, and yeah, the very ending matter has not yet been completed because it seems, I don't know, it almost feels like there's this right way to do it, and I don't know what that is. And so I've read the beginnings and endings of other business books, and they often start and end kind of with the opening and the conclusion of different narratives. And I'm not wild about that personally, even though I do understand it's best practice. But
right.
what do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask another question,
Okay.
if I may. Um, so with that sort of traditional way of doing beginnings and endings, how does that strike you as a reader?
Um, I this You're never supposed to say this, right? But I find them really boring. If I'm getting a business book, I want information. I don't want a bunch of stories about stuff. I would like the steps. I would like the instructions and the information for how to apply the content of the book.
Okay, great. Okay. Now I want to segue. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. Intros are often not read because of that tradition of being kind of like droning on about stuff, and let's just cut to the chase. Let's get to the meat of the matter, right?
Yeah.
And so I used to never read intros, and now I actually read them because I know what's involved. And that's part of the reason I came up with the idea, and you did exactly this, is to write your introductions last.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because do you see now why I said that?
Yeah.
I mean, because my theory is that you learn a lot through the writing of your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it happen for you where you were kind of coming up with new ideas and you ended up rearranging some things
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So you're going to end up having to go back and rewrite the introduction anyway. And it's probably going to be a lot more interesting because you've just now kind of celebrating, you just wrote the book. And now you can kind of go back. I use that analogy of building the house, and then, the introduction is kind of opening the door and inviting people in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I do want to look specifically at your introduction. So that's going to be really fun to see. I've read through it, and I have a couple of things I want to point out to you. But just for people who are writing a book, pro tip, write your introductions last. And the purpose of an introduction is not to be some boring blah, blah, blah about the author, right? Its intention, as far as I'm concerned, is to make a connection with your reader, to really invite them in to something that's going to be terrifically valuable for them. But there's also another thing, and that's, that building that relationship with you as the author, because you're asking them to spend hours and hours with you.
Depending on how fast they read. Yeah.
Right. But your book is, it's meaty. It's got a lot of stuff in there. And so they're probably going to wander around in there for a while. And so when they get to, kind of know and like you right off the bat, they're going to say, okay, kind of like Megan, I'm going to keep reading the book. She gets me, and she's going to show me something that other authors have not shown me. That's why I'm still looking, right? So that's the purpose of any introduction, is just really making that connection and getting them interested in reading the rest of the book. Yeah. So it definitely needs to not be boring.
And of course, that is because I don't want to be boring. It's a book about podcasts. It's a dense book with a lot of sometimes tedious instruction in it. So I do definitely want to at least set the tone that this is gonna provide a little amusement as well.
Yes, exactly. So you do that right off the bat. And so you say at the beginning, I'm just reading this, so I'm in the habit of skipping the preliminaries and getting right into things. It makes better audio for a podcast, right? And then, so I wanted you to read that first kind of numbered list that you put in there, and then I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay, perfect. And just for context, for watchers and listeners in the future, this has gone through a couple of iterations so far. So this is like my current most favorite of my drafts that you're about to hear, and we'll now see what Amy says about it live.
Yeah, and you can actually, Megan, it might be more effective if you just start at the beginning and read through those first three numbered bits. Okay,
here we go. In a podcast, you have just seconds to grab someone's attention and start delivering value. So I'm in the habit of skipping the preliminaries and getting right into things. It makes better audio. But this is a book and not a podcast episode, and since it's already in your hands or on your screen, I don't need to convince you to get it in the first 30 seconds. And what's more, the fact that you have it means that I can guess a few things about you. 1, you've either got a podcast or you're feeling pod curious and a show might be in your near future. 2, you believe that podcasting is a good marketing strategy, but the exact details as to why and how it's a good marketing strategy are a touch vague. 3, you absolutely do not have the time or money to waste on an audio-based wild goose chase. If I'm right or if I'm wrong, but you're still interested, then hello. Welcome to an evidence-based approach to podcasting.
Yes, so that's the intro to your intro. And you don't call it an introduction, which is great. So what I like so much about what you've done is we go back to when you defined your audience. And I was so impressed that you so deeply understand your people who are really interested in doing a podcast, not just for the fun of podcasting or because they're super passionate about podcasting, but because it's going to help build their business. Yeah. So what you've done so brilliantly here in those
I love that word. Please go on.
Is that you've said, I see you and I get you. And so the person reading, they're saying, oh, phew, she doesn't believe in doing all this preliminaries. She's jumping right into it. And now you're reflecting back to them who they are. And then they can say, yes, I like that. And I also like some other things about Megan, which is she's not trying to sell me on the thing. Like that's really a bugaboo of mine. I hate that when someone's trying to sell me the book. I've already bought the book. I'm reading it. You don't have to convince me. I'm already, something about it has already interested me. And now we're getting into the meat of things. So my point is that the connection is being made with your reader right from the beginning, so that's what I really love about this. And that's the purpose of your introduction. So I think you've already shown really nicely in the first part of it that you understand them, that you know and like them, which makes them know and like you.
That's good. That's good, because I think one of the biggest concerns, and first, thank you for the kind words. I'm glad that you like it, and I feel very good about it now. But I know in previous iterations, I know often there's more of an origin story right towards the beginning, and more about kind of how this book came to be and why it came to be, which just, it did not sit right with kind of how I do business or how I talk to people. And so I'm really glad that's kind of going a little more on the practical. And I don't know if it was you who told me, or someone has told me to just kind of turn it right back around on the reader, right at the end. Instead of taking the spotlight on me, I can turn it on them a little bit as the person who is reading the book. And I think that was a little bit of a breakthrough for me in terms of creating something I'm comfortable with.
Yes. And it's the anti-boring introduction, right? Where it's all about somebody they don't even know yet. This is saying this book is about you and it's for you.
Yeah.
So, and you're actually naming who they are. So there's already saying, wow, this author has some insight into what makes me tick and why I care about doing this big thing called creating a podcast. So yeah, I think you're spot on. And let me talk a little bit about the end of an intro.
Yes.
So the beginning of it should draw your reader in, really keep them reading, and at the end, invite them into the rest of the book. So, and you do that really beautifully at the end. And so the last line is, then let's begin. You're inviting them to, okay, now we're going to get going. So that's a really, I would always recommend people do that, where the person feels a little connected to you now. And so now we're going to begin the journey. Let's go.
It was really interesting, because I'd say the lower 3/4 of the introduction, that came as if it was received from out, like when you flow, it's really in flow and it's really easy to write, and it goes really, like, that was easy getting to the end of the introduction. The beginning of the introduction, my God, I've agonized over this part of the book. It's the only part I've really agonized over, I think.
Yeah. Well, it seems to flow really well and meet the criteria of what you want to do in an introduction. So I really don't have any critique or feedback about things that you need to add. I feel it's complete. It's a nice length. It's long enough to draw them in, but it's not, some introductions are 10 pages.
We've got businesses to run.
Who has time for that?
Awesome. That's great. And so make sure it's for posterity, the criteria for an introduction. So it needs to get the reader to feel seen, to know and like the author. And is there anything else it should be doing, like in terms of like setting the framework for books? I feel like one of the other things I did is I really did understand there is kind of one key thesis of what I'm sharing, and that's you need to change the way you think about podcasting. And that was what I really wanted to do in that opening chapter. Is that kind of what an introduction is also for, or could that be elsewhere?
No, that's thank you for bringing that up, Megan, because the other purpose is to validate that they made the right decision.
Okay. Yeah.
By buying this book. It's like, you are in the right place. You have done the right thing. This is going to give you exactly what I promised.
Okay.
So, and that's what you do too. You kind of go through why they want to read this book,
Mhm.
or what it's going to give them. It's like the benefits of what they're going to get from it. So
Yeah.
they should be pretty excited by the
Okay.
time they get to the end of the introduction of like, okay, I didn't buy some book that is not going to answer my problem, not going to solve
Yeah.
my issue, or give me the information that I need. So it's that, sort of patting yourself on the back by like, okay, I did good. Now we're going to learn something.
And now I quite like my introduction. And I think you watchers and listeners of the future will like it also. It'll be available in fine retailers, fine purveyors of books anywhere near you. You can read the whole thing. It's great. Gold star from Amy, as you see. So is there anything else we should know about intros before we move on to the part I'm now a little bit less confident of, the end of the book?
Yeah. I think, it's just everyone is unique. Just like your voice is unique in your industry and in your space. So make it, make it yours. Like we said at the beginning of this episode, you don't want to make it some boring traditional thing that people are like, yeah, I've seen this 20,000 times before. Shake it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Put some of your personality into it. So that's what you've done really beautifully. And put your mind in the mind of the reader. You bring in your own perspective, but you also exactly know the perspective of your reader. And it just is nice to feel seen.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
Yeah,
a
it is.
beautiful thing that you've done for your readers, is to really invite them in and say, it's okay. I get you.
Okay. Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. All right.
Okay. So
Let's
then for the
bring on the
end,
pain. Let's talk about the end.
okay, as you do so beautifully, you bring your own unique flavor to the end of the book too.
Mm-hmm.
And so the purpose of the end of that last chapter is to kind of wrap things up, maybe remind people of all the absolute value that you've given them throughout the book,
Mm-hmm.
and again to help them feel seen. And in a nonfiction book, business book like yours, you want to give them, okay, now what? What's the next step? So I think you've done a beautiful job. And I do have one little thing I'm going to suggest that you do to make it even up level it even more.
Yeah.
So do you want to, I'm trying to think if there's a spot that you can read from this, just to give listeners another little teaser from the end of the book.
Well, let me say first, just to put a little more context, I am less confident in the end of the book, especially now that we've had this conversation, because it perhaps ineffectively, it does kind of introduce a new idea at the end of the book. And I'm not sure if that's the way to be going. It's not very long. Why don't I just read the current end, since it's
That sounds
probably
great.
going to change before publication?
That
Teaser,
sounds
everybody.
great.
All right, I will do that now. And it's been a couple of days since I've looked at this, so this will be interesting.
Okay, good. Give us
All
lots
right.
to chew on.
So the title of this is currently, "What Kind of Podcaster Are You?" There are many different types of podcasters. There are those who live and breathe podcasting and who love the medium for the craft of it. And there are people who see it as a stepping stone to recognition, fame, riches, and glory. And there are those who see it as an effective method to support the other things that you do. So I have just one more thing to share before you go off and create a new metrics tracking spreadsheet and call up your best clients for interviews. You can create a great podcast that makes a measurable difference in your business without becoming a podcaster. You can be one, of course, if you like. But a podcast for your business can also just be something that you do for a particular purpose to achieve particular goals. The podcast industry is full of rah, rah, rah. Podcasting is the best. And the expectation seems to be that you're going to be over the moon. Can't wait. Oh my God, so excited to start one. And you're going to add podcaster to your LinkedIn bio and your about page and maybe your business cards. If you're podcasting to achieve specific business goals and not because it's the single most important way you're going to make your mark on the world, then that attitude can be a little overwhelming and even a little distasteful. It's one of the reasons I delayed having my own show for so long, even while I was producing for others. I had and have no desire to be a podcaster. So I call myself a reluctant podcaster because my show is an effective means to an end rather than a core part of my identity. So I want to emphasize that it's optional. That's why I focus so much on the value. Measurable, repeatable value a podcast can deliver to your business's bottom line. If that's what matters most to you as well, maybe you're a reluctant podcaster too. I think it's a good thing because we're not in this only for the love of the game. The podcasts we create need to pull their weight in our businesses, and if they don't, or we can't identify where and how they're providing a return, the project has got to go, and there doesn't need to be an emotional element to that decision. We have data. So I hope that what you're feeling right now at the end of a very long and rather technical book about counting is inspired about your business and what a podcast can do for it, about bringing more efficiency to your operation, about seeing different kinds of value from a single work product, and about experimenting with something new and iterating until it works. Because when you're podcasting for business, your podcast isn't really a podcast. It's a tool that you use to create different kinds of value for your company, and you decide what that value is when the format follows the function. Using the Business Podcast Blueprints method, you'll get to decide how much of that value there's going to be. And that's the most important thing, because remember, podcasting is just part of your job.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I have some things to say about that, but I want to ask you, what about this are you not happy with?
Okay, well,
or worried about?
My vanity is coming through a little bit more because now when I read my own work, I'm always like, oh gosh, I'm clever. How good I am at this. Awful. But
I think that's a good thing.
Okay. I think I really like the idea of, I think it's the reluctant podcaster bit, because I am using that a little bit more in kind of different messaging that we're doing, and it is becoming more a part of like the branding of the company and about, me as someone who speaks in the industry. But I don't know if this is the right place to introduce that idea. And so I think that's making me feel a little anxious about including it here.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of the strengths of this and why it's great. And then let's talk about reluctant podcaster and how you can really make it powerful at the end.
Okay.
This is fun. So for me, it's fun.
Okay, good.
So I said part of the purpose of the ending is to remind your folks of the value that they've just gotten from the book. And you do that. That's why I focus so much on value, the measurable, repeatable value a podcast can deliver to your business's bottom line. And you talk about the metrics. You mention all the things that this is the tremendous value that you've gotten from the book, right? And that now you can take into your own podcast. So that's great. It also brings it really back to them. You're talking about, what it can do for you, and you bring yourself back into it too as the reluctant podcaster.
Okay. Yeah.
So what I think is missing, and how you can tie in reluctant podcaster to what's missing is, okay, now I get it. I've got all this information. As a reader, I may be feeling a little overwhelmed and like, I'm supposed to just go like, do this now, like create my own podcast. So I would encourage you to put a call to action, to add a call to action. If you too are a reluctant podcaster and you'd like some help creating your own thing, that's what we do. That's what my company does. So it doesn't have to be heavy-handed or super salesy or anything like that, but I think it's a clever way to tie in the reluctant podcaster, because you've already identified yourself as that reluctant podcaster, and you've moved through it and helped dozens and dozens of other podcasters, some of whom are reluctant, to do this. And so I think it's like, if you want to be, if podcasting is the big, huge thing in your life, or if you're a reluctant podcaster, we can help you. How does that feel? How's that land?
Well, I'm glad you bring it up because there are a few points throughout the book where I do have calls to action and describe ways that we can help. So there's one kind of towards the beginning of the middle section, where I kind of say, as you read this, you may find yourself thinking, this is brilliant and there's no way I'm ever going to do it. Here are the different ways we can help you. That's in there once. I think there's another mention somewhere else. And then in the chapter immediately preceding this one, there is quite a lot of content. So it's a questions you should ask a service provider before
Oh,
hiring them.
yes.
And I have my company's answers to each one of those questions underneath kind of the instructional content about what you should think and how you can evaluate the responses. So coming right off of that, it feels like that might be a little, I don't want to make it too salesy, especially right at the end, especially after they have just gotten kind of this, here's all the reasons One Stone Creative is so awesome. I feel like
Yeah.
adding it again might be a little much.
Okay. So that's something that we need to talk about. Now, let me ask you an interesting question.
Okay.
What kind of podcaster are you? What you have now as the closing? What if it's the penultimate? What if hiring help is actually the closing of the book, the last chapter?
It could almost be like an appendices or a reference for after.
It's not really an appendix. I wouldn't say, I mean that because that sort of relegates it to a reference section.
Yeah.
Which is not, you really do want people to read that hiring help. And then it's got your calls to action. So that might be that, just sit with that. I don't expect you to make a decision right this second,
Yeah,
but that
I
is a
think
possibility.
the issue there then is right now the ending of the current conclusion is really good. But the ending of the hiring help one is just a normal ending. It's not a book ending.
Yeah. So we may want to revisit that. But so it says, remember, podcasting is just part of your job. So I think that could transition really nicely to it's part of your job, but you don't have to do everything yourself. There's hiring help, which is consider that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely like it's a good ending note is the thing. And I think making it not the ending note would definitely lessen its impact.
Yeah.
But again, maybe I'm the only one who sees the impact.
Something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think again, like I have tried to be very mindful to, cause like this book is going to be a selling tool for me. Like it's going to be useful and someone can buy it and take it and run with it and do great things with it. But I'd like some of them, 3 or 4 a month to say, hey, I'm going to hire this company to do this for me. That's like one of my main reasons for wanting to write this. Not the only one, but one of them.
Yes.
But so I've tried to balance it, and I did a little math on it. So there's about 1,700 words of self-promotional content out of the close to 80,000, which I feel like is a reasonable proportion.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I feel right about ending on a selling note.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like the information's all there.
It's all there. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And what I do like about your current ending is that it does really bring it back to your reader. The focus again, just like in the introduction, is on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But these are interesting questions, to ask yourself anytime that you've got a flow going in your book, just to ask the question, what would it be like if we switched this to be in front of that? Does it still flow? Does it work? Does it flow better? Or does it, no, that doesn't feel right. It's as an author, you can do it any way you want, and always keeping that eye on what's best for your reader, what serves them best is going to help you make that decision. Because yes, it's a tool for you as an author, as a business, but you're providing tremendous value to your readers. And so you always want to, have them foremost in your mind.
Yeah. And I think I do ultimately, I do want to give people kind of the chance to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm kind of a reluctant podcaster. Like, people are telling me all the time I should have a podcast, and I'm just like, ugh. Because we can really we can make that person's life very easy. And I'd like them to also know it's okay to not be super into it, because like the industry's really into it. And like you don't have to be. It can just be work, and that's cool. So I do really believe in that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. See, that's the thing. I love to ask the question, and then you as the author always have final say, right? You get to say, no, this is how I want to end the book. This feels right to me. Everything's there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'll put a link to our website on the next page.
Yeah, and the website will be, on the back cover. It will be in the author bio. It'll be,
yeah,
people will be able to contact you very easily.
Yeah, it'll be no secret. So yeah, I think I might actually just let it ride.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got
now
a
I've
book.
spoiled the ending for everyone who's ever going to buy the book. The good stuff's in the middle, everybody.
There's lots and lots of good stuff that you've never heard before.
Yeah. No, I think that's okay. Good. No, that's a good process to yeah, because the thought, I was less comfortable about it, and then you're like, why don't you change it? I'm like, no, don't wanna. Which was revealing in its own way.
Yeah. But that's great. I mean, you feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
You want to end it this way. You want to, bring it back to your reader, and that's great.
Yeah.
And it does have a nice relation to the introduction then. That sort of bookend kind of idea.
Yeah. So perfect. I'll probably give it a last little polish, maybe rework a couple of things, but I think functionally it's pretty much what it needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for teaching me how to start and end a book.
Well, you've done a beautiful job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Amy again. I hope you had as much fun listening as I had talking with Megan about the beginning and ending of her book. It's always creative fun to dig into the actual content and see what's going on there. So I hope that you learned something from it, and it got you thinking about how you would start and end your book. Since we've been talking about the beginning of the book, and more importantly, the end, it means that Megan is coming to the end of her book writing journey. So next we're going to be talking about, okay, manuscript is done. Now what? And there's a lot to it. So I invite you to keep listening to the next episode as we move on to, okay, now the heavy lifting of the book writing is done. What are all the things that you need to think about next as an author? See you then.